The Texas Chainsaw Massacre. A classic in the slasher/horror genre and one of my favorite movies of all time. Since the original came out in 1974, there have been a total of 9 movies, and it's one of the messiest and most confusing franchises because there's like a mess of timelines. If you want to watch them, you kind of need a guide to go through them. I just thought it would be fun to just try to explain the franchise just because I love these movies. There should be chapters if I figure out how to do that, so it's like all not confusing like the franchises. I even have a visual aid. Don't worry about that. I'm gonna start off with an overview of the timelines and explain the order they should be watched in, and then I'm gonna go into like the varying family trees, comparing the different versions of Leatherface and his personality, overall tone, and like color palette and stuff like that. Starting with the first one, obviously, the foundation of it all, the Texas Chainsaw Massacre 1974, where most of the other movies spawned from. Directly from that movie came the Texas Chainsaw Massacre Part 2 in 1986, which was a direct sequel to the first one, and the only, like, real, actual direct sequel, in my opinion, that actually feels like a sequel. There have been a lot of direct sequels. After that came Leatherface, the Texas Chainsaw Massacre 3, in 1990, but don't let the name deceive you, it is not a third movie in a trilogy, it is another direct sequel, kind of, to the first one, but there's like new family members and it feels different. Like Leatherface is kind of different in personality and it kind of just feels like a remake, but it's supposed to be a sequel, so I'm just gonna say it's a sequel, and it just retcons the part 2 movie. That's pretty much the first original timeline. After that, a movie called Texas Chainsaw Massacre: The Next Generation came out in 1995, and that movie was basically a parody of the original movie. It just kind of exists on its own. It's absolutely insane. It's kind of terrible, but if you go into it knowing that it's a parody and that it's not supposed to be taken seriously, it is pretty funny at certain points.
And your drinks will be out in a minute.
Right.
Oh, lady?
Uh-huh.
I think you got something in your trunk.
That's just somebody I got tied up back there.
There are some very weird, uncomfortable scenes in it that I don't like very much, but there are a lot of very funny scenes in it, so I don't like hate it or anything. The Sawyer family, what they call the Slaughter family, they work for the Illuminati. It's a whole thing. I think it did very poorly when it came out, but some people have come around to it. Yeah, I don't hate it. I think it's fine. So after that came the second timeline, the Texas Chainsaw Massacre 2003, which was a remake of the first movie. A totally fresh start, a totally new timeline, its own thing. And then after that came the Texas Chainsaw Massacre: The Beginning from 2006, which was a prequel to the remake. And that movie did very bad when it came out, so that just ended that timeline. They didn't end up losing money on it, they still made a profit, but it made significantly less than the remake. I actually liked The Beginning a lot. I didn't really like the remake, but I liked The Beginning more than the remake. So, I don't know, maybe that's just me. And then there's timeline number 3, which decided to go back to the direct sequel to the first movie route with Texas Chainsaw 3D in 2013. And this movie did not do very good. A lot of people consider this to be one of the worst in the whole franchise. I actually like it a lot. It is a bad movie, but I like it. I just like it.
Contender! It's your cousin!
And like with the previous timeline, they came out with the sequel after 3D, which is called Leatherface and came out in 2017. And that is timeline 3. This timeline's probably the most confusing one, mostly because of Texas Chainsaw 3D. The movie is about a character who was a baby when the original came out, and then she's 20 in this movie, but it's supposed to take place in the present, which was at that time 2012. But she would be like in her 30s by then, and she's 20 in the movie, and it was originally in the script supposed to take place in the 90s, but then they made it in the present anyway. I don't know, it's a whole mess. And then finally we come to the most recent iteration, Texas Chainsaw Massacre 2022, which, in my opinion, is the worst one yet. That one was supposed to be another direct sequel to the first one, yet again, but I don't really see how it is, because it doesn't at all feel like a sequel to me. So yeah, the most recent movie is, I guess, its own timeline connected to the first one again. Oh, and I almost forgot, there was also a movie called An All-American Massacre, which was not released. It was in production from 1998 to 2000, and it was supposed to be released. It had a release date for theaters and everything, and then it just wasn't released, and nobody knows why. It was supposed to be like a prequel and a sequel to Texas Chainsaw Massacre 1 and 2, like a side story about the character Chop Top. It was apparently completely filmed, just never released. They said it was due to like money problems with post-production, but people have theorized that it had something to do with rights issues because the owners of the rights to the characters like was constantly changing and stuff. There's a teaser trailer out for it, and I'll like put some clips of it here probably.
Far out.
There was like a Facebook account and website teasing its release. It started out as a 15-minute short, and then it was going to be a 60-minute featurette, and then it just didn't happen. So who knows? I would love to see that movie. Now for the family trees. The reason these get confusing is because, well, the families keep changing every movie, and also the family's inbred, so who knows where all of them really go. They go in multiple places. So, I'm gonna start with the original timeline. First off, we've got Grandpa and Grandma Sawyer. They're the oldest ones we know about in the original. And then, it's sort of uncertain if Drayton is Leatherface and Nubbin's brother, or if he's their dad. He might be both, like I said. Most people seem to call him their brother, so I'm just going to put him here as the brother. But you know, maybe he's also their dad. But yeah, the three that we've got, Drayton, Leatherface, and Nubbins. And Leatherface is just called Leatherface in this movie. He isn't given a name. He is given a name later, but in this movie, he's just called Leatherface. So then we get part 2, and this movie is, like I said before, a very direct sequel, unlike most of the others. So we've got all the same family members, but now Chop Top is included, and he is Nubbin's twin brother, so another brother is added, and we get a name for Leatherface, Bubba, which is my favorite of his names that he will be given.
To stoop my shoulders, taking care of my younger brothers.
Now on to Leatherface, the Texas Chainsaw Massacre 3. So this movie changes some things around in terms of the family. So now we have Ann Sawyer, she's the mom, and still Drayton might be the father, and also her son, again, uncertain. This movie retcons the second movie, so we've got to get rid of Chop Top. And now we have 3 new brothers. Tex Sawyer, technically Edward, but he hates being called that, so Tex Sawyer, Alfredo Sawyer, and Tinker Sawyer. Oh yeah, and I need to add Nubbins back in, because he still exists, he's from the first one. And Leatherface has a daughter in this movie. Who knows who the mother is, probably somebody that they ate. And he's not called Bubba in this, he is referred to as Junior for the most part.
Hey, Junior! Got something special for you.
Now on to Next Generation. So this movie, like I said, exists on its own, so it's got its own little family tree going on. In this movie, their last name is Slaughter instead of Sawyer, because, you know, parody. So we've got Grandpa Slaughter, Grandma Slaughter, unknown child, and then to Leatherface, who is referred to as Leather in this movie. We've got 2 brothers for Leatherface, W.E. Slaughter, and Vilmer Slaughter, and then Vilmer's girlfriend, Darla. Interestingly, W.E. Slaughter was apparently the original name for Drayton in the script of the first movie before it got finalized, so that's fun. The 2003 remake gives us a whole new family tree again, and a completely new last name. So they're now the Hewitt family. I still find it very strange that they decided to change the name. Hewitt just doesn't feel right. I don't know, it's weird. Anyways, so we've got Luda Mae Hewitt, who gave birth to Charlie Hewitt with an unknown person, and then we've got her brother Monty Hewitt, Uncle Monty. And then in this movie, Leatherface is actually adopted, and I have no idea how to put an adopted child onto a family tree, so I'm just going to draw a different colored line. And his name is Thomas Brown Hewitt, which is an interesting choice. And his actual birth mother's name, who died during childbirth, her name was Salone. And then we also have another character, a little boy named Jedediah Sawyer. It's not really explained how he's connected to the family. Maybe he's Charlie's brother, maybe he's Charlie's son, maybe he's Charlie's child with his mom, maybe he's the child of Luda Mae and her brother, who knows? This is a very incoherent family tree, but it's fine. Now onto the 3D and Leatherface timeline. We've got Grandpa and Grandma Sawyer again, and their kids are Boss Sawyer and Bear Sawyer. This one gets confusing. So Boss Sawyer is Verna's dad, so he gave birth to her with an unknown person, maybe with his mom, again, inbreeding. And he has Verna and also Drayton, and then it's like more directly stated in this movie that Verna and Drayton are brother and sister, and they're also the parents of Leatherface and Leatherface's siblings. It's like a little more explicit in this timeline. So Verna Sawyer and her brother Drayton give birth to Leatherface, Nubbins, and Loretta Sawyer. And Leatherface's name in this timeline is Jedediah Sawyer. And then Loretta Sawyer, with a unknown person, probably one of her family members, gives birth to Edith Rose Sawyer, which is the real name of Heather Miller, who was taken from the family in Texas Chainsaw 3D. And finally, the most recent movie. This movie is supposed to be, like I said, a direct sequel to the first one, so it's just basically the same family tree as the original. We've got Grandpa and Grandma Sawyer again. Again, maybe Drayton is the dad. Leatherface, Drayton Sawyer, and Nubbin Sawyer as the brothers. In this movie, Leatherface isn't given a name. I don't remember him being called anything other than Leatherface in this movie, but I tried looking up if he had been given a name for this movie, and one of the wikis that I found said his name was Kenny Slaughter. I don't know if that is true or where they got that, because that doesn't seem right to me, but yeah, I'm just gonna erase that, because I have no idea where that came from. So yeah, that concludes my overview of the family trees. Now I'd like to talk about the different chainsaws, because I like that the chainsaws keep changing. I think it's fun. I'm gonna break out my visual aid for this. They're not gonna be like perfect recreations, but for the most part, these are pretty close. This is basically what the chainsaw from the first one looked like, more or less. Short and stubby, a normal chainsaw, one might say. And then in the second movie, which I absolutely love, they just made it, like, ridiculously long. A silly length, really. Yeah, I just think it's fun. In the third movie, he has a chainsaw at the beginning, but then, like, halfway through the movie, one of his brothers gives him a new chainsaw, and it's my favorite thing. The saw is family, that's so cute.
The saw is family.
Like, all chrome and fancy, and, like, he's very excited about it. Leatherface loves it. He's very excited about it. But yeah, I just think that's so funny. I love that. I love that for him. Good for him.
You like it, don't you?
And then in the 3D timeline, we see, like, he has, like, multiple chainsaws in Texas Chainsaw 3D. I just took the one that he's using at the beginning. It's, like, a little bit longer than the original chainsaw, but thinner. More or less like this. And in the remake timeline, they were trying to make everything, like, gritty and, like, darker. So they were like, no color on this chainsaw. Gray and silver, that's it. So it's, like, short and stubby, pretty much like the first one. They just got rid of any color. Yeah. I also have one for Next Generation, the parody movie. It was a pretty basic chainsaw. Pretty similar to the first one, really. It was, like, a little bit thinner, that's the only difference. Pretty close to the first one. And then in the most recent movie, 2022, they used the same chainsaw from the original movie, so it'd be this guy. Thank you for coming to my chainsaw show and tell. So, the tone and, like, color palette of the movies kind of changes. The original, it, like, has, like, a really good balance of, like, creepy and uncomfortable and, like, comedy. There's, like, this air of goofiness to it that I feel like is just captured perfectly in the first movie and has never been captured the same way again. And it actually has, like, a fair bit of color to the movie. Like, it's not, like, super dark. I can bring back my visual aid for this. In the center here, the original color palette. A good range of colors. And then the second one really amped up the color. It's a very colorful movie. It's a very fun movie visually. Lots of bright primary colors. It just goes in the direction of total comedy, and I think it does it very well. I think it's very funny. It's a very fun movie. The third one had pretty much the same color palette as the original. In terms of tone, it's, like, a little grittier than the first movie. The third movie didn't do very well when it came out. I like it a lot. There were some funny, cheesy moments that I enjoyed. Like, there's, like, a scene of Leatherface, like, doing his lessons. He's, like, using this little, like, electronic thing that, like, gives him an image, and then he has to type in the word that it is, you know, like, one of those little lesson things for, like, little kids. And then, like, an image of a person keeps popping up and he keeps trying to type in food, but they're like, that's not right. I thought that seemed very, very cute. Then with the remake timeline, they said, no more comedy. Only dark. Also, the movies are like, they're entirely green. Like, the color palette, green. These movies are very green. Just be very serious about it, which I think was kind of to its detriment, because I think one of the best parts about the original is the fact that it has this weird, like, goofy silliness to it. Losing that kind of makes the remake timeline my least favorite, honestly, because I just feel like it's not very fun. And then the 3D/Leatherface timeline, a lot of golds in the color palette, especially in Leatherface. Like with the remake timeline, it takes itself a lot more seriously than the original timeline, but it's like not quite as intense and gritty as the 2003 one was trying to be. And then the newest one, I just put a lot of blue in there because of the one party bus scene that was completely blue, which is like the only part of the movie I liked. That scene's funny.
Try anything and you're canceled, bro.
Parody movie. I put purple in there because of the one girl who's just wearing a full-on, like, vibrant purple suit. It's more colorful because it's like a parody. But I feel like it's less funny than Texas Chainsaw Part 2. I feel like Next Generation kind of falls flat a little bit. Like, there's some really funny scenes, but then it gets, like, really intense, and there's some, like, really aggressive, like, domestic violence stuff happening. The one guy, Vilmer, is, like, extremely creepy toward the girls. Every time he's on screen, it just makes me nervous. So that's like the general tones of the different timelines, and then there's also the different personalities of Leatherface himself. In the original movie and Part 2, he's like this very like childlike, kind of nervous, just trying to do what his family tells him, and then when he does something wrong, he just like cowers. He's not like your typical scary slasher villain because he's like a big child basically, and I just think it's very entertaining. He almost, like, doesn't know any better. Like, he's just killing people because his family's telling him to, and he doesn't really understand that it's wrong. In the third movie, Leatherface, The Texas Chainsaw Massacre 3, he's still pretty much that personality, but they started to make him a little more intimidating. And then the parody movie, Next Generation, they just amp the childishness up to 100, and he's just, like, running around screaming constantly.
You sit the fuck down! And shut up!
Look at that guy. Look at this guy. Then in the 2003 remake, they just made him, like, very brooding and, like, intimidating and big and silent, and that's probably my least favorite version of him, just because he's just less fun. He's chasing after someone, and he's just, like, silent. I missed all of the, like, little noises that he would make. And then in the 3D timeline, he is, like, not quite as intimidating and brooding as the 2003 remake, but, like, close. And he does not like to be touched. I did enjoy this version of Leatherface, but still not as much as the original. And I think that's everything. So, goodbye.